Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Mary Rectoris, and I'm a producer on Relativity's creative team and a producer of our On the Merits docuseries. So really quick, Jenny, if you'll go to the next slide. On the Merits, we launched the docuseries in 2019 with our first film titled Flint. And in that film, we told the story of not only what happened, but what continues to happen to the people of Flint following the 2014 water crisis. We really looked at how their legal team is harnessing data and analytics to uncover who knew what so they can get justice on the behalf of the residents. So that's what really launched our series and our North Star for what we're trying to accomplish. And what On the Merits is, it provides the legal tech community a look at important world events and those at the center of the event. So really excited for that docuseries and to discuss our second film in the docuseries, Pandemic. So without further ado, I thought we could take a couple minutes to show you all the trailer, and that'll be a great segue into our discussion with some of the film stars today. So
time is critical. I mean, this was in early mid-March. The impact of the virus was largely unknown.
The longer time it takes to be able to diagnose something appropriately and to treat it appropriately can have long-standing ramifications.
Everyone really wanted to feel as if they were empowered to do something.
I'm not a doctor, I'm not in healthcare. It wasn't obvious what I could really do. And then this call to action for analytics, for data science came.
You know, we're creating AI tools that are able to start parsing through the large amounts of data that a normal human could never go through and find relationships that we didn't even know existed.
AI can empower physicians all over the world to give the same amount of care to everyone, regardless of where they were born, regardless of their socioeconomic status. That's always been the promise of AI.
all right, so that is a trailer. You can view the full film on our On the Merits page and the trailer as well as our film I was talking about earlier, Flint. So I encourage you all to do so. So today I have a panel with some of the stars of the film. So really, really excited to chat with you all. And I thought that kind of starting us off here, Dr. Murray, and we'll go down the line to Lucy, Tayeb, and Trish. Can you just tell me a little bit, or tell the panel rather, about yourself, your role, and something fun about you? Put you on the spot a little bit.
Something fun about me. Okay. My name is Jose More. I'm Chief Medical Innovation Officer for Liberty Biosecurities. We work on developing extremophile technology with NASA for biotechnology services. I'm also CEO of Ad Astra Media, which is a company that's focused on inspiring kids from underserved youth to go into the fields of science and technology, focus on developing edutainment content, so both educational and entertainment content that is both shows people from different backgrounds and also inspires them to go into those fields. My role on the project was really reviewing a lot of the work that other people did, making sure that verifying the medical perspectives and making sure that the different charts and graphs that were created by the machine learning and also by the people, the supervision that other people made was actually had clinical validity, that was actually moving things forward from us from a clinical perspective for us to be able to really derive insights, both identifying things that the data was showing us and also things that the data still needed more research in. So that was the role that I played. As far as an interesting thing about me, I was born in Puerto Rico. I have a birthmark that kind of looks like the island on my arm. And my mom, the folklore is my mom actually looked at the moon and asked the moon to put that on my arm. And so she says. I'm not going to disagree with mom because she'll yell at me if I tell her she's wrong, but that's an interesting caveat.
That's a great and a very specific fun fact. I really like that. Great. Lucy, kicking it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. My name's Lucy Liu Wong, and I'm a postdoctoral investigator at the Allen Institute for AI out in Seattle, Washington. And I primarily do research in the areas of text mining and natural language processing over biomedical and scientific text. And last year, I was involved in and helped lead the creation of the COVID-19 data set, which was discussed in this short film. I don't know if I could follow up Dr. Mora's story, but I guess during the pandemic, since we're not doing any social events, I've gotten much more into climbing mountains, and out in Seattle, there's a lot of them. So in 2 weeks, I'm going to go and try and summit Mount Rainier. I guess that's like my, but only an attempt. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
Keep us posted. That is like even going outside sometimes is a challenge. So good for you, Lucy. You'll kill it. All right, Tayeb, over to you.
Hello. My name is Tab Wasim. I am the Chief Scientific Officer over at Stability AI, where we try to create decision-making platforms for policymakers. I'm a computational biologist by training, did my PhD in immunology, and was also a public policy fellow for the American Association of Immunologists during the COVID pandemic, so much more intense than it probably would be otherwise. And really, I worked on the project kind of on the other end of what Lucy and her team were doing. So they created this amazing data set. And my goal was, how can we now leverage all of these various data scientists and teams and help create useful tools to make the most out of the work they're doing. I've been racking my brain, trying to think of a fun fact during the first two. The best I came up with is I'm a type 1 diabetic who then went into research for type 1 diabetes. It kind of moved my whole career path. So the reason I went into a PhD in immunology was because I got diagnosed in college with type 1 diabetes.
I also, not to steal your thunder, I'm a type 1 diabetic, and Tayeb did promise me first the cure. So holding you accountable, this is on record. So very exciting.
We're working on it.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of improvements on there. So appreciate the work you're doing on that. And last but surely not least, why don't we go to you, Trish?
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Trish Gleason. I'm a senior product manager at Relativity. Relativity is an e-discovery platform. And at Relativity, I've spent most of my time leveraging AI to accelerate document review in legal matters and compliance. My role in COVID-19 was, as was mentioned, there were some data scientist tools that were used to understand the data, and Relativity contributed a couple of those tools. And my fun fact, not necessarily life-changing by any means, but when I was very young, I bought a magazine and won one of those like trips to Florida in it. Like someone actually wins those like magazine like scratch off things. So I won that. It was fun.
Yeah. Do you still do scratch offs? Do you go to like White Hen or 7-Eleven?
Oh, I actually just forgot about them until we talked about fun facts. So no, I do not. They have not been part of my life in quite a while, but maybe this will inspire me to go back. Yeah.
Great. Well, we have a lot of great cues queued up for the panel today, but all of you, we have time allotted at the end. So would love to hear questions you have for the panel about their work, the process. We'll definitely get to those. But to kind of set the stage, Trish, why don't you take us off here? Like, can you define what is COVID-19 and a little bit more how you specifically got involved on behalf of Relativity for this project?
Yeah. We have like Lucy, the COVID-19 expert, but I will answer. So public health researchers, a year ago, a little over a year ago, had a lot of just really important, immediate questions around the COVID-19 virus. And what COVID-19 is it's a data set that was created by a semantic scholar that contains hundreds of thousands of research articles around the virus. And the purpose of the data set was to help public health researchers like really quickly answer those like critical questions. how I got involved, there was like a call to action that was circulating in the data science community. It was definitely talked about. And pretty quickly, we recognized relativity and our technology could help. There, COVID-19, it's a lot of data, and they need data science to help make sense of the data and find answers. It's really what Relativity's technology was built to do.
Love that. And you mentioned a lot of your work at Relativity is accelerating document review for legal matters. So this is a little bit different. I'd love to hear, like, how is this like a total change from your day-to-day, but how did it complement some of the work that you do?
Yeah. So as a product manager, a lot of my day-to-day is strictly in e-discovery and like compliance and those like adjacent markets. It really differed because we collaborated with a global data science community. Relativity, we worked with other data scientists through this like Kaggle platform. We were able to recognize through this collaboration like where the COVID-19 like needed the support, and we also like learned from others' work. So that was very much how it was different. One way in which it was similar was, one day we're kind of brainstorming ways Relativity's technology could help, and just maybe a couple weeks later, it was in the hands of public researchers. So, that kind of immediacy of our work also applied here.
Yeah, that's really cool to see. Thank you, Trish. Lucy, the COVID-19 expert, would love for you to talk about like what Semantic Scholar, what was your role here in getting COVID-19 out to the public researchers and the scientists?
Well, I don't know about expert, but we were definitely very involved with this project from the beginning. Back in March 2020, I think it was Dewey Murdoch from Georgetown CSET who first reached out to us on behalf of the White House. There was a really big group of collaborators involved, Semantic Scholar at AI2, of course, also Georgetown, as I mentioned, Microsoft Research, Chan Zuckerberg, bioRxiv and medRxiv, National Library of Medicine. Hope I'm not forgetting anyone, and of course, Kaggle. And we were asked to do this project of releasing this data set of COVID-19 related papers so that folks in the machine learning community, folks in the text mining community, like groups like Relativity could contribute to this like hugely ballooning problem. There was just like tons of articles. There was also historical research that contained information about coronavirus that could have been useful. And of course, we were only given 6 days to put together the data set at the beginning. Semantic Scholar got involved because we're an academic search engine, an open academic search engine. So we already deal with a lot of papers and this type of content. We have the data and we have the infrastructure for dealing with this. And I specifically got involved because we wanted there to be machine readable full text in the COVID-19 data set. So that was something that I had worked on along with my colleague Kyle Lowe and some others. We had just created this pipeline for extracting and representing structured full text from these papers. So that's the pipeline that we used to create that part of the COVID-19 data set, and that kind of cemented our role in creating the data set.
And I think we talked about this in our initial call, Lucy, but it's kind of a rarity in research to have that full text available, right? It's usually only portions of it, and there's some safeguards in place.
Yeah, I mean, I think, of course, a lot of scientific papers are not necessarily licensed for open reuse. So that was something we had to contend with when creating the data set. We could only release the full text of papers where we had that license to reuse the full text. And it's not like we were inventing the wheel when we extracted full text. People have done it before, but we tried to provide it in a kind of structured way that, you essentially have all the semantic information of the document so that you could apply these various machine learning algorithms to do textual discovery.
Well, and one last question, not to keep putting you on the spot, Lucy, but 6 days seems like a quick turnaround of something of this magnitude. Was this new to Semantic Scholar? Are you all usually like racing towards deadlines like this, or people pulling late nights? For you, walk me through this.
Oh, I mean, as a researcher, I think we're all very used to kind of like burning the midnight candle the day before a deadline. But I think for this, it was kind of an engineering and a research endeavor at the same time. So a lot of people had to be involved and got on board on 6 days. I'm not going to lie, we made some mistakes in the first couple versions of the data set and had to correct course to make sure that the data set supported some of the use cases that people wanted. So we learned a lot while doing this, and it was a continuing process from that first release.
Great. Tayeb, over to you. Tell me about you and Dr. Murray. How do you guys work together before COVID-19 and specifically on COVID-19? Interesting for that contextual background.
Yeah, Jose's been a mentor to me actually for a while now. So when I first met him, he kind of was like, what are your goals? What do you want to do? And really, I enjoyed finding ways to integrate emerging technologies into medicine and research and even policy work once I started getting into that domain. And so once I started working on the project, I think if he wasn't my first, he was definitely my second call I made of here's the project I'm working on. Here is the direction I think would be the most useful to go in and make it beneficial for clinicians and researchers. And then I'd say, I want to pretend that he was just a sounding board the whole time where I'd bounce things off of him, but there were quite a few nights where after he got out of clinic, he was manually going through tables that I'd made and double checking them and just, trying to put together, quick little literature reviews to get other data put out there. So it was a lot of fun kind of just going back and forth of trying to balance the tech side of it of here's actually what's possible with data science right now with most people in medicine who don't have a great grasp on technology of what they expect AI to be able to do right here, right now.
And for those that don't know, the COVID-19 data set was housed in Kaggle, which is an online platform where the data science community can go. And I learned to engage in all these competitions. You get points. It's like a huge gamification system. But for this project specifically, people were really interested in contributing to this effort. And Tayeb, you actually were approached by the CEO of Kaggle. Can you tell everyone how that conversation came to fruition and you got involved to run the public research side of the coin?
I would definitely say it's the other way around. I definitely slid into Anthony's DMs. Anthony presented the work at the Stanford High conference, and I love watching the Stanford High conferences as they come out every month because it keeps you up to date on what's going on in the field. And I saw the project, and he had a couple of gaps that he was trying to fill. So, school was out, I had the relevant background, and I sent him a message saying, would love to talk about it and get involved. And then it just slowly transformed into this full-on project where, he has a whole company to run, and he's like, love for you to kind of just take over this arm and actually just make it fly. And that's actually what, having people like Jose, who's run massive companies before, and just being able to coordinate all the different people that are involved was really helpful.
Can you set the scale? How many people were involved from the public research side to the science side, and how did you kind of manage all of the moving parts there?
Yeah, so Kaggle hosts probably around 5 million data scientists on it. Paul Mooney from Kaggle was the liaison between the millions of data scientists and our medical research team. And the medical research team really got its footing. So from a couple of different places. One, I reached out to people like Jose and other clinicians as personal favors of I need you to get involved. To the National Scientist Volunteer Database was very, very helpful for helping find the leadership. There were groups like Corona Y and the End Coronavirus team who had not only just clinicians and scientists, but also those that kind of specialize in data science as well. I think I might have even thrown some posts on Reddit here and there. It was fun because everybody was stuck at home and wanted to find a way to get involved. And if you even had a decent understanding of the background, you could find one small way to coordinate. We use Slack for most of our communication. And really, I think it was the leadership team that I surrounded myself with. So Michael Boot, who was a postdoc researcher at Yale, Lucas, who was a PhD student at Harvard, Jan, who is a medical student, and Master Kagler from Germany. And oh man, I really hope I'm not forgetting anyone. Yes, the three of them were really the ones kind of leading the charge on helping coordinate all these people. So I think at first I was very hands-on and involved at every little aspect. But as it grew, I was just trying to steer the ship in the same direction.
And not to totally one up you, but I do know a Kaggle Grand Master, which is, big. One of our film subjects, Gabriel Preda, he is from Romania. And I was interested from like the production standpoint of this, of getting more voices from the data science community around the world. So the amateur I am, I actually went on Kaggle, did a little bit of research. I'm like, oh, he has a lot of points. I'll just message him on LinkedIn. And Gabriel and another gentleman, Jose, responded right away like, yeah, I'd love to be of help. I'm like, wow, this is great. So we got to hear their perspectives, and it did really show the global scale and interest on a large scale behind this, which was great.
I think we had 30 countries represented by the end of it.
Wow, really?
So just from the medical side, a lot of different institutes around the world wanted in one way or another to find a way to get involved, whether it's helping with the utility study and literature reviews or actually just parsing through tables. Everybody wanted to find a way to help.
Is that a rarity for those that don't know a lot about collaboration in the medical community and on research? Is this something that's unique, or is this the standard?
No, especially not at that scale. It's impossible to get everyone to have incentives lined up appropriately. And luckily here, the incentive wasn't necessarily a publication or a grant or future funding that's going to come from it. It's purely altruistic that I have the ability and I want to find a way to help. And I think that was part of the beauty of the whole thing.
Great. All right, Dr. Moret, did you want to add on that?
Oh, I was just going to add that it, like Tayyab said, it's really the scale that made this very different than anything else. I think it shows you the power, though, of when you have something that's bigger than yourself, that you can get people to come around and kind of rally around it, right? I mean, people from all over the world, all different walks of life, were willing to come in and do their small parts. But Kaggle is a very good illustration, though, of the computer science community, of the things that people have been doing and building, and the power that you can have from the crowd, whether it's crowdfunding or crowdsourcing, and the fact that the more diverse you bring in, that there's that old adage, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And look at the amazing thing that was able to be done with just a diverse group of individuals from all over the world with different backgrounds, all trying to do one goal, all trying to fight one thing. And that's, for as many things as divide us throughout humanity, this is a very, very powerful example of what you can do when you kind of put those things aside and focus on just trying to do something that's better for everyone and not just for individuals.
Do you think this will be replicated? I know COVID is something that everybody's impacted by, so you do have that common cause. So for something that's a little more nuanced, like Tayyab, let's say type 1 diabetes or another disease, could you see that same call to arms on a global scale and the immediacy factor of this?
You're asking me or Tayyab?
I'm asking both of you, putting you both on the spot.
Tayyab, go ahead if you want, or I'll take it first.
I'll go less probably for type 1 diabetes, though. I'm hoping everyone on this call is like, we sympathize with Mary and Tayyab. We want more money there. But for any global complex problem, so when you look at things like climate change, these aren't something that you can just silo that this is only my problem. It affects everyone, and I think the more we realize that everyone is impacted by many of these issues, the easier it is to get incentives aligned. I think that's what it always, I feel like, starts to come down to, is how can you incentivize everyone to work on the same thing or to do the right thing.
And Happy Earth Day, everyone.
Happy Earth Day. Happy Earth Day. Are we going to sing? No, we don't have to sing.
You can sing at the end if we're feeling it.
Yeah, if we need filler. I would concur with Tayyab. It is difficult to get everyone aligned and have everyone pointing in the right direction, but I think that's really the power of storytelling and really trying to help people understand, like there's so many things, especially with politics, so many divisions that people say, oh, well, this only affects me and that doesn't affect me. I don't need to worry about that because that's not my problem. Whether it be a particular disease, whether it would be climate change, whether it would be, income inequality or digital deserts or food deserts. But if you can tell a story passionately enough and you can integrate and tie that into the fact that, yes, this is something that does affect you. If of nothing else, it's affecting your fellow humans, right? It's affecting humanity around you. And being able to tell that story that's impactful and gets people motivated to do things that gets them, it ties to that altruistic component that really is in people if we just can get out of our own little bubbles and out of our kind of like struggles that we see right in front of us. And if we can do that, if you can get different groups like you had here and good leadership, and Tayeb sells himself short. Yes, he was very smart in being able to go out and find people that can help him and get, the correct tools to be able to accomplish, but really he carried a huge load of that. And that's the important thing about being a leader, understanding what parts, what skill sets you do have, what skill sets you do not have, and how you have to go out and recruit to be able to get people that are hopefully, ideally smarter than you around you and let them do what they do. That's really what is a key leadership. And he deserves a lot of kudos for that. But I think we can if we get the story right and if we get people to focus on those types of things. And you're seeing those movements though, and other things. You're seeing it a lot, especially with the younger generation, particularly around social impact and social change. And you're seeing because of different types of technology, whether it be social media for as many things as social media does horribly to divide us, it still is a tool to be able to rally people together for good and for the betterment of all. So you are seeing it in other things, but you need to have people that are passionate to tell the story and be able to explain it in a way that is impactful to other folks, and not necessarily. You have to be able to explain it to them. So you need to be a good storyteller. I think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the way that she was able to make so much impact for really female reproductive health was really telling 12 men, this slew of men as to, hey, this actually impacts men's health. This is how this very same thing that's impacted women's health is impacting men's health. And once you can tell a story in a way that other people can understand it, then you can really change hearts and minds. So I think the onus is really on creatives such as yourself, Mary, and your team, which is doing an amazing job of how you tell those stories to move people to do things that are beyond just one person.
Definitely. And I think that was part of the fun and the challenge in producing this documentary, because we're talking about a very dense and complex topic where I think I was talking to Trish and maybe Lucy about JSON files, and I'm, nodding my head, but the whole time I'm like, what is that? And, I'm the standard audience, so someone who's not super, super well-versed in tech, but our audience, we want to make sure it's applicable and compelling to those super well-versed in the medical community, those in the tech community, and just the general population. So I think storytelling, trying to, think about your different audiences and making it strike a chord with everyone is a challenge, but I think it's really compelling part of this and really enjoy doing that for On the Merits. And Trish, I think Dr. Murray was saying, what he said really reminded me of a great line in the film that you said was your passion for this, that you're not a doctor, you didn't know what to do. And I think like many of us, we didn't know what to do beyond just adhering to like safety protocols for COVID. I'd love for you to just talk a little about your motivation for getting involved in this.
Yeah. You're, a little over a year ago, it was a very different time, and, everything was changing so rapidly. And I'm probably of this group about as far away from the medical field as you can be. And, product manager and legal tech, it's not, it right away, to see that start to circulate in the data science community, it just felt really like motivating that there was just this tiny thing that could contribute. It felt like, for me, it had a lot of purpose.
Great. All right, switching gears slightly, I think a theme that the film hits on is kind of biases in data in healthcare and like the need for AI to remedy those. So Dr. Murray, going to tackle this with you first here. So thinking about biases in data, what did that mean in the context of here with COVID-19, but kind of the broader medical research? What are some of those biases that exist?
Yeah, AI, I often say AI is really, when it comes to all emerging technologies, AI is the one technology that is most like humanity's progeny, because it really is essentially a perpetuation of the way the system is, which is why that you can unfortunately perpetuate systemic inequalities by just taking existing data sets that have been established on sometimes racial stereotypes or other kind of legal or political implications. And then those are the data sets that are used to train. And so the algorithm itself, no matter how fancy it is, can't get beyond the data. So you're going to just kind of end up perpetuating that. In medicine, particularly, I mean, you think of some of the medicine as a whole, we're historically, we take the Hippocratic Oath and we're supposed to first do no harm kind of thing. But realistically, that hasn't been always the case, particularly to certain communities that have been underserved or have been disenfranchised in many ways. We've done horrific types of trials going back, into the early 1900s or even before that, and even in the late 1900s, where certain things were done to certain subgroups, and those were used for data sets. And if you take those data sets and start creating algorithms, then you can do some serious harm. And we've seen that. And then sometimes it's been things where you just exclude certain individuals for a lot of different reasons. Again, often systemic reasons. For example, if you take some of the largest cardiovascular studies, like the Framingham studies or the European SCORE studies, a lot of these things were often done just on men, and often just on men of Caucasian descent or higher socioeconomic descent. Same thing with like bone studies trials that they've done to evaluate where if people are developing appropriately, like Grulich and Pyle, which is one of the gold standards. It was done on just Caucasian kids, middle income to higher income in the Midwest. So my background is Hispanic. Here we have a very diverse audience. So if you took those same things and tried to apply them, which often we do, I mean, a lot of drugs, whether it be hormone therapy drugs, or whether they be drugs for mental health, or even cardiovascular drugs, a lot of these drugs have only been tested, for the most part, historically, on men and on white men. So when then you use that same drug that's only been tested for one particular gender or one particular ethnicity, and then you apply it to everyone that's on this screen right now, and then you start wondering, oh, well, why isn't it as effective for a certain ethnicity or a certain gender? Well, it was never tested on that. And that's the problem, that we have this huge diversity. We have digital divides, and then we have biased data sets. And if you use those data sets in the way that they were created, in the times that they were created, then unfortunately AI can perpetuate that. And that's the risk. And we've seen it in healthcare, we've seen it in the criminal justice system, and it's something that we know is a problem. And yet, even outside of healthcare, we're still using certain AI applications that are systemically biasing certain individuals. And it's an issue. I mean, even not in healthcare alone. I remember Amazon had created this HR application where they went through and tried to sift through a bunch of CVs to identify the best individuals to be able to hire for jobs. And the algorithm was basing it on existing Amazon workers, which were primarily male. So the AI actually denied anyone who was a female, anyone who went to a female college, anyone that played a female sport. If you had anything in there that had anything that had to do that you were a female, you were automatically denied. And that's based on the inherent bias data set. So imagine for healthcare, if you're thinking about who's going to get proper care, well, if certain ethnicities, whether you come from low income, Black, brown, or whatever background you have, if your outcomes in the data set is worse than someone that comes from a higher socioeconomic status, then the algorithm is going to say, if you have a limited resource, well, hey, you shouldn't treat this person because they have a worse outcome than if you treat this person. And we actually have that occurring with certain AI algorithms, and that is a huge problem. So healthcare physicians need to be aware, need to be involved in how these things are done to be able to understand the limitations of their tools. AI is just a tool, just like anything else. And just like physicians are educated in other tools of, hey, when do I use this particular diagnostic test? Or when do I use this particular intervention? Well, they need to be educated in machine learning and in artificial intelligence, as it's going to be the major tool that we use going forward into the future. So having MDs involved in these types of things, I think is integral and is obviously a soapbox of mine.
I think Trish can relate to that. You don't always think, Tayeb and Dr. Murray, you are the exception, right? But you don't always think lawyers or doctors are the most tech savvy individuals. So what are your thoughts on this? Why do they need to get well-versed in tech? Why do they need to understand AI? What are the repercussions of that lack of knowledge?
So it's me or Trish, I'm sorry.
Why don't we go to you, Dr. Murray?
Well, for those very reasons, physicians need, and I'm a strong proponent that we should be teaching computer science and machine learning as a secondary language. It should be to everyone at the lowest level, because there is nothing that is not going to be touched. I mean, we at all parts of our lives are touched by some sort of computer science algorithm. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us use Google or other types. I don't know if Relativity doesn't, if you use Outlook or whatever, I apologize. But you know, when you're trying to finish your text messages and your text finishes for you, or you're writing your email and that finishes, or hey, if you're on a dating app and it's telling you who you should date, or if you're on Netflix trying to chill and it's telling you what you should watch, there is nothing that isn't algorithmically pushing something onto us. So for us to be able to understand those limitations, so that we can understand how those things are being created, is very important, not just in medicine, but in everything. And then it really goes back to really understanding the systems that created those data sets. If we don't understand where those systems came from, the biases that were put into those systems, whether it be, if we use zip code data, if you use zip code data, the initial way that those zip codes were created were based on Jim Crow laws of redlining. If you take zip code data to do any kind of algorithm, then you're going to be putting inherent bias in there if you don't understand where that data came from. But you can actually start creating new data sets, or start creating different types of tools that can identify, all right, why is it, the Amazon example, for example, why is it that certain people are being rejected? And you identify, oh, it's because it's rejecting anyone that has female in it, or anything like that. You can create different tools to try to identify, try to figure out where your bias is, because sometimes we don't know where the bias is. And other times, like the zip code, or like in that Amazon example, we can figure it out. But at other times, we may not know what it is that's causing the bias outcome, because it's kind of a black box, right? So we don't understand how the algorithm is working. And in other times, it won't be until later that those things come out. Those things come out, understanding where those biases are. So when you have a diverse team working on these things, that's when you can start really getting an understanding of how things are. So I think it's very important for everyone of all backgrounds to be involved in these things, because you have to be cognizantly aware of the fact that these things could perpetuate racial biases, gender biases, all sorts of things into the future. And if you aren't actively involved, then you can be a part of the problem in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Murray. Tayeb, thinking through the potential of AI, once we as humans recognize that these biases exist and our AI algorithms could have those inherent, what can AI do, though, to actually in the long term remedy some of the current biases that do exist in healthcare data?
Well, I think one of them, Jose just nailed on the head, is when you try to apply some of these algorithms that are developed to actual good quality data sets, you realize where some of these inherent biases that you might not even known existed actually are. And I think that's the first step, because until you have some sort of inherent bias that exists, it's very, very difficult to make it go away. People are also now creating tools that are specifically made to go through data sets and try to find biases. So, I think the data science community has been doing a phenomenal job of recognizing that this is a major issue that they need to be kind of on the forefront of.
Great. And Lucy, going over to you from the academic point of view, is this something that Semantic Scholar had top of their mind, either with COVID-19 or with other data sets? How does bias in data impact your day-to-day or your role as a scholar?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of my experiences are very similar to the things that Dr. Moray and Tayeb just pointed out, which is that right now we are becoming more of this, we're becoming more aware of this problem. And rather than getting directly to mitigating these biases, we're really trying to understand what they are and like what features of these data sets impact downstream performance of these AI models in a way that we don't want and doesn't match our kind of ideal view of how they should act. So there's a lot of excellent conversations and work going on in the machine learning community about how to address these issues. And I think in the short term, it's really important for AI practitioners to be cognizant of essentially what is in our training data. It's like, where did it come from? Who did it come from? Who did it not come from? Who does it not represent? And then sort of use that to inform ourselves on the limitations of our models. Because ultimately, like, the goal is not to deploy models. The goal is to deploy models that perform something that we want them to perform. So if the right thing is to either disclaimer the model, or maybe the model doesn't do what we want, so we don't deploy the model, those are good decisions, right? Like, we're really ultimately responsible for the data sets and the systems that we create and deploy. And it's like in our best interest to try to preempt that harm. I think with COVID-19, we, I think there are, for example, documents in that data set that wound up being like retracted or were lower quality, and those are things that I think as researchers who work with scientific literature, that's something that we need to contend with as a community, as a group. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Trish, before we get into the Q&A, because we have some great cues rolling in, what do you think this project, COVID-19, illustrated about the data science community and how it's evolving?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, this project was really my first experience like collaborating with the data science community, such a global scale, and really getting out of this e-discovery world I had been in. And one thing I found about it was just, and this has been touched on a few times, but how much this community is interested in helping and how motivated they were and how willing, and the Kaggle platform really shows that it's built on this idea of collaboration and learning from each other, and just how like that is just a pillar of this massive group. And that's really inspiring. It's just a really cool thing to witness.
Yeah, I think it was either Gabrielle or Jose were saying, you like show your work so people can see step by step what you did. So you can't be like, I'm going to hide this and take all the accolades. At least in this, there's other competitions, but it's not about that who had the best answer. It's literally about just getting the answers, whatever AI you use to get.
And then everyone can learn from your answers. Like it's just the benefits just grow from that type of approach.
Only everything could be like that, but alas, it's a little maybe too positive for now. But all right, let's get into the Q&A. We have a lot of questions coming in. Lucy, you're gonna throw the first one here your way. Did COVID-19 experience any political issues when bringing the whole world together? And how does AI deal with data that should be part of the base, but it is not there for whatever reason? So it's kind of a two-part question there.
Yeah, sure. I guess for the first part, which is political issues, I don't really think I have any like direct examples of this, although earlier in creating the data set, we received some requests, for example, to include articles published in other languages, like especially I think Chinese, Korean, some European languages, Spanish, Italian, so on, because those were early epicenters of COVID-19. And there, I mean, I don't know if this is a political challenge as much as kind of like a social and cultural challenge of, I think some countries are less open about sharing their this type of data. So there were challenges to including some data that maybe should have been in the data set into the data set. And those are barriers that some of them were ultimately not surmountable in the short term. But we're working on trying to essentially mitigate these issues going forward, say with other emerging problems. And that's somewhat related to the second part of this problem, which is like, what if there's data that should be part of the data set and isn't? I think there will always be, say, relevant documents that we could have included, but either didn't know about or were from a source that was not open or available to us. And we really tried our best to increase the scope of the data set based on requests, right? Like we were interacting with the data science community through Kaggle, and they requested certain sources. We added new sources as time went on. We really just tried to be very responsive to the feedback and needs of people using the data set.
Thanks, Lucy. Tyab, this is a hard-hitting one here that came in from our friend Josh, who is the videographer on this film. Tyab, this is my first time seeing you without a bow tie. I'm wondering, what is the ratio of bow tie versus no bow tie in your life? Oh, and thanks for your help with the film.
He's very welcome. Happy to help. I am on vacation in Charleston, South Carolina right now, so there are no bow ties. But only when I have to get dressed. It was between a button down and a Hawaiian today, and I didn't get as professional as Dr. Murray, but here I am.
Still looking good though. Still looking good.
It's like when you have a group text, what's everyone wearing? We, left it up to chance. But I dig it. I think this one is open to all. Dr. Murray, this might be in your wheelhouse, but how focused is the industry on hiring minorities to ensure that the data set created do not have one person's bias and incorporates the ideas and infos from minorities? And who can help to create data sets that are more inclusive?
It's a good question. It's a bit of a mixed bag. Some companies are trying to change this and are focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is kind of a political movement, right, where it's something that people are understanding that needs to change. So certain companies are more proactive than others. I think everyone is trying to a certain degree, or at least a certain subset is trying to a certain degree, but there's definitely still a ton to go. I mean, I don't know if you've seen some of work from Joyable and Weenie or the AI Justice League folks, but this all came out where they evaluated facial recognition software. She's African American, and the facial recognition software, she's from MIT Media Lab, didn't work at all for her. She didn't realize, she couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. And she put on this white mask and it said, oh, it works perfectly fine. She dig a little dig deeper into the AI algorithms, and all of the big facial recognition software companies, whether it be Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, IBM, they all had the same thing. They all had the same problem. Data sets were primarily, I think it was like 80-90% male, and then also like 95% Caucasian. That's why it didn't recognize her. But the same thing is in the medical community. The O2 monitors that you have on your finger, it doesn't work on highly melanated skin because it wasn't created on people with darker skin tones. So you actually have, even on things that are very basic technology within healthcare, that haven't been created or tested on a large swath or a diverse swath of individuals. So companies need to be more motivated and more focused on it. There are some that are trying to do better, but for the most part, it's nowhere near what it needs to be. If you have diverse coders and diverse people that are actually creating algorithms, they'll be able to catch the fact that, oh, hey, 99% of the data doesn't look like me and my family. Perhaps we should, try to mitigate that a little bit. And it's just very simplistic things like that. If you look different than the data you're creating, you're gonna be like, we could probably fix this before it actually gets out into the ether, right? So it's a huge problem. But the other problem is that you need to create a pipeline. And the fact is that there's not enough diversity, whether in gender or in ethnicity, that it's getting kids from underserved communities, getting kids that look different to go into the fields of science and technology. And that's a huge thing that, at Astra, we're trying to change. And a lot of people are trying to focus on getting kids to get inspired to go into STEM fields and getting those from the ones that we really need to get them to be inspired to go into computer science, into microbiology, into medicine. You need to get them, and you need to not just educate them, but you need to inspire them to want to do those kinds of things. So it's a multifaceted problem, which takes a multifaceted kind of solution. So it needs government kind of mandates and regulations to say, hey, you need to be making sure that you do these kinds of things and meet these kinds of kind of goals and metrics. But it takes us as individuals, trying to push companies to do that, and also, trying to move the economies in that direction. It takes private industry wanting to do this and listening both to government and listening to individuals. And it takes the educational sector trying to create that pipeline, that K to career pipeline, where you get kids from underserved communities to go into those things in college and eventually go into those jobs. So it's not nearly enough. And it's a generational problem that we'll have to keep working on. And it takes all of us to be a part of it.
Definitely. And going back to what you said about going into schools and targeting groups that might not have representation in STEM, it's so important to have that representation. So you see people who look like you and sound like you and from the same background, you think, I can have that same opportunity, I can have that path. So
Exactly.
Conversations are super important. Eli, you have a question here. So if I don't fully gauge it correctly, please feel free to type in the question box. But Lucy, I'm going to direct it towards you because I think it's pertaining to COVID-19. It's how can doctors get involved, learn, and contribute? I think COVID-19 is ongoing, so it's a continued effort. Is that correct, Lucy?
Yeah, the data set is still being released, and I think there's definitely still groups working on it. I wonder if Tayeb would also be able to comment on this question, since he's definitely been much more involved in organizing big groups of people and working on these challenges. But I'd say, if you're interested in collaborating or in any of these problems, please reach out. And there's tons of problems to work on. Yeah.
I agree with Lucy. There are tons of problems to work on, unfortunately. But our specific project within using COVID-19, it wasn't a project that was meant to go on forever for us on creating the tools. It was, can we create the tools? Can we get them to those who actually need them and want to use them? So we teamed up with various medical journals who have incorporated many of these tools in, a couple private industry folks. We had groups who were working on vaccine development and distribution who were keeping track of various metrics. And the nice part about Kaggle is you do end up publishing your work so they can see what the underlying scripts that were used to get to that conclusion were. And so people took that work and they moved it forward. In terms of just getting involved, I think I have projects thrown at me all the time where people are wanting to get the perspective of those who want to integrate, tech and emerging technologies into medicine. Dr. Murray always says that he's like, it's not that AI is going to replace physicians, it's going to augment their ability. But, I'd almost even go further now and say AI is going to replace those physicians who don't get with the times and start learning how to use that technology. Because just like, the physicians that bucked at the EMR or were anti using some of these diagnostic tools because they believed that their ears were better, or they believed that they could, smell the disease on the person. Those are antiquated, and fundamentally we're going to change the way medicine is practiced.
Great point. There was a question that was submitted ahead of time, which is great. I always love when people are proactive. So I want to make sure we get to this. So this is applicable for everyone. So whoever wants to take it first, but it says, after the initial rush and dust has settled, what was your feeling as your work had such an impact globally? Lucy, why don't we start with you? Because you saw this from gathering all the data to, data scientists and physicians making sense of that. So what was your initial feeling once the dust had settled a little bit?
That's a really interesting question. I think my kind of main takeaway from this whole, situation so far is that a lot of people in the machine learning community and the data scientist community, we have these really powerful hammers. And this was like a problem that we really were eager to work on. But there's still some distance between the methods and the tools that we have and the problem space. And I think one thing going forward that we can learn from what happened with COVID-19 and coronavirus is that like the community, the machine learning community really needs to branch out into these applied areas more to understand what practical methods work in these spaces, to understand the problems that people are facing in these spaces. However, I do think that this whole model of trying to capture like the community's attention and efforts together and direct it towards a specific important problem is something that worked very well, and it's something we'd like to experiment more with in the future. Like how can we, right? I think Tayyab and Dr. Moray already said this, but how do we incentivize people to work on these problems? Yeah.
Great, thank you, Lucy. Tayyab, why don't we go to you next?
Yeah, I mean, the dust settling really just showed, you know, humanity does have all the resources it needs to tackle these complex problems. It's really the right mix of tech and cooperation, with the emphasis really on cooperation. You know, you have to reach out to fields that aren't your own and try to find their perspective. You know, Dr. Moray always says you want to reach out to people that don't look like you, that don't sound like you, that are from a completely different culture, because they're going to have a completely different way of looking at the world. In the same way, you want to reach out to people who are engineers, you want to reach out to artists. Everyone approaches the world in a different way and has something of value they can contribute. If you want to be a leader in this space, your goal is to figure out how you can leverage other people's talent towards that common goal.
It's a great point, and it's a very proactive effort. You know, you got to go out and seek people that aren't in your immediate network, which usually is people who look and sound like you. So being cognizant of that and proactive, I think, is key. So thank you. Trish, why don't we go to you?
Yeah, I think as the dust settled, I like had a couple like very individual takeaways, seeing, you know, this like submission on Kaggle, and then as this documentary came to be, how many different areas it touched. I don't think about the medical space probably often enough, and seeing that the technologies and the problems of like understanding legal documents really is applicable in so many different fields. Like I understood that logically, like at a very high level, but actually see it like applied was really interesting, and just, you know, related a lot of the work that we're kind of all working on, you know, a bit siloed, just the like tremendous overlaps in the problems we're solving, and how like if we all come together, it really illuminates the overlap we have.
Thank you, Trish. And Dr. Moray, why don't you take us home here?
Happy to. The dust settling, I think this is one of the things that made me want to go into technology more than anything else. As a physician, you have the opportunity to help people in a very unique way, right? You're able to heal. And there is something that is very unique to be able to do that, because disease is, as we've all struggled with it, whether personally or with family, is kind of the great equalizer, right? Doesn't matter your status in life, doesn't matter where you came from, doesn't matter how much money you have, how much political power you might have, or prestige or accolades. When you're sick, it's the same with everybody, you know, whether you have pneumonia and you're in the hospital, or you have cancer, like you're on the bed, it's just you. It's that great equalizer, and to be able to help someone in that capacity, there's something very fulfilling about it. But the unique thing about being involved with projects like this, or being involved in things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, is that you have the opportunity to help people and heal people that will never know that you were a part of it. Trish, Lucy, Tayyab, Mary, everybody on this call, they have been a part of helping people that will never know them, helping people that will never hear the word thank you from. And there's an old saying, I'm not sure who it's from, and Tayyab always makes fun of me because I always have sayings, but but there's a saying that says that the measure of a person is really about what they're willing to sacrifice for future generations, of which they will never be able to hear the words thank you from. And that is something that is very, very unique. And these types of projects, these types of things are really what brings out the best of us. And if you're not being a part of that, then I don't think you're really experiencing the one trip we have around this sun together. So that's the thing that keeps motivating me. And I think that's the thing that keep motivating everyone here, and hopefully everyone that's listening to us.
This was a lot of fun. I can't believe the hour flew by, but I want to thank the panel for joining me today and throughout this journey. And I hope we can all continue working together and sharing the amazing work that you're doing, because it's super inspiring. And like Trish said, although I love e-discovery, you don't really get to hear about the practical healthcare implications of technology. So cool. And thank you for everyone for joining, and have a fabulous day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.